Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak on the Health Legislation Amendment Information Sharing Bill 2023. But before I do begin, I would like to also start by saying a big thank you to all the health staff in South West Coast across the 7 health services within my electorate. There's been an extraordinary challenge on the health staff with the COVID over the last few years, but also as a result of the fact that the health services are just not getting the funding they require to support the health staff. And I would like to put on record my thanks for the hard work. They take their responsibility so incredibly seriously and take it very personally, the health of our community, and for that I am very grateful. And that brings me to the purpose of this bill, which is to provide or establish a centralised electronic patient information sharing service, which enables services to access information about patients and their previous treatments, medications, allergies, admissions, discharge summaries, outpatient consultations, laboratory and imaging results and the like. Now, on face value, this is a good idea. It's a very good idea, and as a clinician in the past, I would have given anything to have had access to someone's information when they've come in from an MCA, a motor car accident, and you needed to know details such as what their blood group was rather than have to wait for a cross-match, etc, etc. So these are things that just make common sense and something we've been wanting for many, many years. In fact, I was on the Primary Care Partnership when they began back in, I think, the early 2000s. I was one of the first board members of the Primary Care Partnership, or committee members of what it was then, which was set up to do exactly that, make sure that we could work out a way to stop patients having to tell their story over and over again. And recently I met with a young girl by the name of Christine Godfrey from Portland, who explained that she had a challenge with her child who has a health issue, and as a mum she found it extraordinary that she had to explain to the speech therapist, then the paediatrician, and then the occupational therapist, and then the psychologist, all the things that were going on from one clinician to another. She said as someone without a health background that just seemed extraordinary, that it was her responsibility, and she felt like what if she wasn't doing it well enough, not understanding the terms and terminology. And she's actually setting up her own application so that parents can communicate through this app with health professionals. But as a young girl with a young family, that shouldn't be her responsibility, and I wish her well on her venture of carefully planned that she's developing. But these platforms should have been done within hospitals years ago. However, whilst I agree with the sentiment of this, I have some very large concerns, and the reason I have concerns is this current government have been in power for the last 18 of the last 23 years, and they've got a long history of some really big stuff-ups, particularly when it comes to IT and managing data. So take out for a minute the privacy issues that I'll go to, but just the IT. This government have done a dreadful job, and there's examples, and I only have to bring up one to remind you about the births, deaths and marriages incident where, you know, the IT system was implemented and 6 months later still people were not able to access death certificates. Now, through that traumatic period of losing a loved one and then being able to get on with closing bank accounts or paying bills or, you know, finalising the affairs is traumatic enough without not being able to do it because you couldn't access a death certificate. So there are many examples of this government who have been fraught with dangers around the way they have tried to improve IT systems only to fail drastically. Now, put that aside, but think about how the trust is eroded with the community with those experiences, let alone this government's, in this bill, not allowing an opt-out clause. Now, as a human being in a free society, one of the things I think is really important is choice. And a government that takes away choice frightens me. What is their intention? Why do they need to take away people's rights constantly to have choice? And here's another example of it. So in our MyGov system, you have the right to opt out. Now, 10% of Australians have done that, and that is their right. But this Victorian Labor government are refusing to consider an opt-out clause. So taking away your right to choice. I think that is reflective of how controlling this government is and how dictatorial they actually are, and how they do not want the community to have the freedoms that we've always known in this state. To me, that is what this is symbolic of. And it's not just me that says this. I'm hearing this right across the board, but particularly when we look at the consultation done by my colleague in the other place, Georgie Crozier, and her notes from the, sorry, it's actually not her notes, it's actually a quote from the Law Institute of Victoria and the information that they've put out as a result of this bill, which was stalled in the last parliament because of these very same concerns. The issue that we can't opt out, but also there is no provision for being able to FOI your own data. It will be in the department for people to look at, people to do whatever they want with. We're not even sure what the parameters around that are, but here's the information from the Law Institute, who say this bill is most significantly, concerns they have with the bill, the most significant being there is no opt-out to the sharing of an individual's health data, and that the scheme is exempt from FOI requests. Patient autonomy must remain front of mind in any health legislation being put forward by a government to protect patients' rights. It goes on, but it talks about how they're very concerned about this being not given to the rights of a patient. But anything that does increase efficiency in a hospital, I do endorse. But I say there's an amendment on the table here. It's a helpful amendment. It improves the bill, and I think it would be remiss of the government not to endorse this amendment. But I thank the local hospital once again, and I look at what South West Healthcare are going through at the moment with their hospital being way too small and the issues around emergency and operating theatres. We finally got this government to agree to an upgrade in 2020, and it's supposed to be complete by 2026, ready for patients in 2027. And I was really pleased to have the update from the hospital, and I thank the staff and the management and the nurses and doctors, who obviously I know fairly well, having been involved in the sector for so long in my electorate, for the updates they continue to give me. And it looks like a really exciting development, but we are going out for tender soon once the government have approved everything. And I just urge the government to prioritise this build. We saw in 2018 10 hospitals this government promised funding for that have not begun yet. Our hospital was agreed to funding in 2020, so I'm very nervous about that being completed within 4 years, given the Heart Hospital that opened in Clayton last week was 5 years overdue. Efficiency is what this bill's about, and efficiency is what we need in our hospitals, and my absolute urge to the government is please prioritise the building of South West Healthcare and do not let it languish like you are the other health services that you promised in 2018. I also think that efficiency within this bill is highly important. But it doesn't take over from listening to the community. And listening to the community, if you listened in Portland, you would hear that they are desperate for services that are being removed. They're desperate to have the support they need to keep the clinicians there, such as their ophthalmologists, such as their anaesthetists, such as their surgeons. So whilst it's really important to have the information technology system robust and talking to each health service, I get that, please listen to the community as well. Labor have a poor track record of listening to our community. They've got less funding in Victoria per person than any other state for health. They've got less resources for staff than any other state for the health sector, and this is not indicative of a state government that really does care about their health system. A health system that I would have thought surely in the last 3 years has been highlighted as one of our very important assets in our community. So once again, I would like to say thank you to the people of the 7 health services and the ancillary services like the GP clinics that actually aren't included in this legislation, which to me is another massive flaw, because if you don't start off your journey with including your GP clinics, then you've really missed an opportunity to improve the efficiencies. So we've got a Labor government in the federal sphere. There is a MyGov system. This could be improved. Let's go from, start where you start with your GP right through to whatever the health journey ends at, and let's make sure this is done properly. But this current bill is flawed.